We start with the rising tensions on the Black Sea. Ukraine has responded in kind to a Russian threat to treat ships bound for Ukraine as potential enemy targets. Kyiv now says it will also consider vessels traveling to Russian ports or Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory to be potentially carrying arms. Both developments follow a decision by the Kremlin earlier this week to allow a deal on the export of grain via the Black Sea to expire. The UN Security Council will meet Friday to address the humanitarian consequences of Russia's withdrawal from the deal. And let's go straight to DW correspondent Nick Connolly. Nick, how serious are these threats coming out of Kyiv?
I think they are serious. I think they are credible. Ukraine in the past has hit Russian targets. We all remember the flagship of Russia's Black Sea fleet that was sunk last year. Similarly, Ukrainian drones have attacked Russian ports on the Black Sea coast, trying to attack an oil terminal in Novorossiysk. That wasn't very successful back then, but they can get that far. I think the important thing here is that Ukraine doesn't actually have to do anything so far. Simply by making this announcement, simply by making it clear that it sees this shipping as a legitimate target, it has imposed a huge economic price on Russia. Insurance is going to be a lot more expensive if it's going to be possible at all. Lots of foreign ship owners might decide it's actually not worth the risk. That's going to have a huge impact on Russia's oil industry that sends most of that oil that's no longer going to Europe to places like India via the Black Sea. And I think the most interesting thing about all this is quite how shocked the response has been from Russia. This seems like the most obvious thing to reply in kind. When you look at the Russian state media, they really weren't seeing this coming, didn't know how to talk about this, and simply had the sense that this is something that Russia can do to Ukraine, but that could never happen the other way around.
Is it really in Ukraine's interest, though, to add to tensions like this?
I think there's a sense here in Ukraine that trying to do what Putin says he wants the West to do, for instance, if Ukraine were to go and ask Western countries to row back some of those sanctions on Russian banks, on other Russian trade, those limitations, that then a couple of weeks down the line, Russia would come with new demands and that it would keep using its control over shipping in the Black Sea and that crucial grain trade that is so important for Ukraine, but also for people around the world, to put pressure and get new demands. There's a sense here in Ukraine, at least, that just by making these announcements we've seen today, they can actually put a lot of pressure on Russia. They can change the psychology, make Russia aware that it is also in a position to lose a lot. And they think that, Russia's oil industry, for instance, coming and knocking on the Kremlin's door and saying, we really need those shipping routes to get that money that you need for your government, actually is more likely to encourage the Russians to keep the current arrangements in place to allow that grain to reach people around the world than any kind of appeasement of those Russian demands.
And if the Black Sea really ended up being off limits due to confrontation there, what would be the alternative for Ukraine to get its grain out to the world?
It's really difficult. Last year, only about 30% of the grain went other ways, by rail, by truck, through the Danube to Romania. But all those routes are much more expensive and simply don't have the capacity. So I think basically, as long as Odessa is shut, we're going to see grain prices rising, Ukrainian farmers suffering, and people around the world scratching their heads, trying to think where they're going to get their bread from.
That was Ukraine correspondent Nick Connolly. Thank you. Always great speaking to you. And I'm now joined from London by Elizabeth Braw. She's a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where she focuses on defense against emerging national security challenges. Good to see you. The grain deal is no more. We know that. But Ukraine's President Zelensky says he will keep agricultural shipments through the Black Sea going. How dangerous is that?
Well, it's extremely dangerous because we don't know how Russia will treat those shipments. Now, Russia, I think, conceivably wouldn't want to be seen worldwide as a country that bombs merchant shipping, carrying grain to countries all over the world. But the problem is that those ships will have zero chance, close to zero chance of getting insurance, because which insurer would want to underwrite ships that are at risk of being attacked by the Russians? So that's where the problem is at the moment.
Both Russia and Ukraine have said that they will treat all ships going to the other's ports as potential military targets. Do you think we will see fighting on the Black Sea?
It's very hard to tell, because a lot of it has to do with each side's willingness to target civilian shipping. And we should remember that Russia has surprised us in many ways already in this war through its willingness to do things that are considered uncouth or just not the thing you do in a war. So we shouldn't count on Russia's willingness to, or Russia's any sort of reluctance from Russia to attack civilian shipping. But the thing is also that it was already difficult for any sort of shipments to go through the Black Sea, through the Ukrainian and Russian parts of the Black Sea, because you couldn't get insurance. It was very difficult to get insurance. The grain deal was the exception, and it was a carefully negotiated exception. And now the grain deal is no more. So will commercial insurers take on this risk? I don't think so. And then it almost doesn't matter what each side does if nobody wants to take the risk and insure those ships won't be going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. So as a consequence, we're potentially looking at food insecurity, famine, and mass displacement around the world. How destabilizing do you expect Russia's renewed blockade to be globally?
Extremely destabilizing. We should remember that the only reason we had the grain deal was that the absence of Ukrainian grain on the global market was causing food insecurity. And Russia came to its senses, partly through pressure from the United Nations, partly through pressure from Turkey. And so Russia came to its senses and joined this grain deal. But there's always been a risk that Russia would leave, because essentially it can hold the world hostage by choosing to leave the grain deal, which it has now done. And there is not really anything we can do about it. There's no country except China that can tell Russia to rejoin the deal. No other country is large enough, powerful enough, and close enough to Russia to force it to do anything. And China is clearly not willing to put on the pressure, apply pressure to Putin to do the right thing.
Yeah, we have been here before, though, and we're well aware of Russia not being a reliable negotiating partner. So how well prepared was the world for this scenario? Is there a plan B we can fall back on to ensure food security?
The global markets, the commercial markets, had essentially been pricing this in, so they have anticipated this for a long time. But if you're a poor country, you can't really price anything in. You just have to hope that the grain deliveries will come to you. So in this situation, it's a very good thing that we have the United Nations. For all its flaws and for all its impotence when it comes to stopping wars, at least we have the United Nations with a food program that can step in to stave off the worst, but the food program is not a permanent solution in any shape or form, and that's something that Russia knows. But at least it can step in and stave off the worst when a disaster or the crisis is imminent.
Mm-hmm. But they also need to get their supplies from somewhere. Talking about plan Bs and things to fall back on, I want to talk about something that you have written about, because it looks like Russia did have a plan B to continue exporting its goods, even as Ukraine's allies were slapping sanctions after sanctions on Moscow. It's clandestine ships, and you've written about it. Can you tell us more about what they are, and if this is something that we're likely to see more of now that the tensions are running high on the Black Sea?
We have seen an increasing amount of it. It started off very slowly at the beginning of the war, and now it's essentially industrial scale clandestine shipping, where goods are leaving Russia either on ships that are very difficult to trace what they are, who owns them, or on ships that do fly under that do sail, I should say, under some sort of flag and are registered somewhere, but that turn off their AIS, so their automatic identification system, which means that you can't see them. You don't know where they are going or where they are coming from. And all of this has been increasing because Russia has customers somewhere that it can ship its cargo to, and this is happening. It's going through the Black Sea, and there's really not very much anybody can do about it, because you would need some sort of Navy or Coast Guard to step in and interfere. Well, nobody's going to risk that. So we have a steady stream of ships going from Russia to various recipients, carrying cargo, which, by the way, is very attractive for the recipients, because Russia has to sell at a reduced price, whatever it is they are selling, all the different goods they are selling at a reduced price, because countries know, or buyers know, that Russia is in trouble. So it's convenient for both sides, but of course incredibly detrimental to the rules-based international order.
That's Elizabeth Braw, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. That was very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.